Hello, world singers. My name is Brooke,
And I'm Tyler.
and this is
Cosmere Conversations. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Nexus Week. That is, of course, if you are listening immediately upon this episode being released, one, thank you for being a dedicated listener. And two, it is Nexus Week. This means that we are either literally en route or already at Dragonsteel Nexus 2025. Big time, lots of fun, but we wanted to release an episode so that everyone, regardless of your geolocation on planet Earth or far in the future, not planet Earth. I don't know how things are going to work out.
Our podcast is going to last for that long.
Yeah, there used to be, radio waves, and like radio could just like transmit into space. That's not necessarily the case with podcasts, but visually and intellectually, that's still how I envision our podcast here. It's just going out into the first
Hello,
Earth space.
aliens.
Exactly. We are so glad that you have joined us, aliens, and we want you to know that in the past,
this podcast has already completely gone off the rail.
We started
This
off
is how
the rails.
excited we are for Nexus.
Thank you for putting us back onto the rails. We have a couple of panels that we are going to be on at Dragonsteel Nexus.
3 panels, more than a couple, a thruple of panels.
Excellent. And fun that you would bring up thruples, as it is one of the main speculations about the character we're going to be discussing today. But if you happen to be at Dragonsteel Nexus and want some immediate feedback, I think the socials, Instagram primarily, but also join us over on Patreon, and you can get into our Discord. That's where we're chatting with everybody who's going to be at Nexus.
Come say hi.
It would be wonderful to meet fans in the real world. Always fantastic. However, for those of you that are not at Nexus, we are going to try to bring our panels to your little eardrums later, and we'll have kind of a nice release schedule for the different panels that we are on.
But for today, we are continuing our series on different character arcs in Wind and Truth. And today we're looking at one of our main characters, Shallan. I've broken this into kind of character moments, character journey, and then some more deep speculation, lore type things that are wrapped up in Shallan's arc in Wind and Truth.
I think perfectly representing the you and I of this podcast. Some deep study, some quotes directly from the text, and then some wild speculation that has no bearing on anything whatsoever.
Yeah, I will say it was interesting for me to go back and take these notes and like look at Shallan's arc and think about her character arc in Wind and Truth, because this is, I think, kind of the least that we've seen of Shallan.
Oh, certainly.
In the series so far, in terms of like how much of the book she occupies. But I will say she was, I think, really the first person that I was thinking about upon finishing Wind and Truth. Like, I closed the book metaphorically and was just immediately like, what the heck is going on with Shallan? I had so many thoughts and questions and feelings about where we leave her. So I thought that was an interesting kind of juxtaposition looking back on it.
Yeah, she didn't get as many moments on the page, but the moments that she did have were really interesting. A lot of, the spiritual realm shenanigans, the unmade, and we're going to talk about all of that today. Kind of her main conflict that she is dealing with. And I think one of the reasons why she gets overall less screen time is because she has progressed so much in the first 4 books. And she's had a lot of character growth and stories. And in Wind and Truth, she's almost kind of like finalizing that character growth rather than exploring new things.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is some wrapping up, some concluding of the path that she's been on, but certainly not in a way that I felt Kaladin's story was kind of tied up, or Zeth's story was tied up, or Dalinar's story was tied up. I think Shallan still had so many question marks and open-ended kind of things for me, even though we do see some of her central conflicts wrap up. In this book, she is super focused on this pattern that she notices of her killing her mentors with her parents and then Tin. And now she's being pitted against Mraize and her kind of struggling with feeling like, is this a problem? Like, am I just destined to kill every person who kind of takes me under their wing or cares for me in any way? She starts to be really paranoid that she will eventually kill Yasna, Dalinar, Navani.
Mhm.
And this is really the biggest chunk of her storyline, just in terms of character arc. It is one of the things that kind of didn't work for me, I think, just because of the structure of the book and the fact that we are bouncing through so many different points of view. Kind of every time we come back to Shallan, we hear this same thought process as a way to remind the reader of like what exactly Shallan is doing. But I did find it a little bit repetitive that literally every time we go to her, she's like, "Oh no, am I destined to kill my mentors?" And then we come back to her 5 chapters later and she's like, "Oh no, am I destined to kill my mentors?" And it's like, I get it. I get it. You're struggling. Okay, move on.
Yeah, there's maybe something broader to be said. I know this is talked about in the television and movie world quite a bit. This concept of like second screen viewing. You always have your phone with you. And
Mm,
so that is like drawing people's attention, which means that the second screen
right. Needs to
needs
be
to
like
be,
more obvious.
yes, it needs to just constantly be reminding people because they're doing other things. They're cooking, they're watching TikTok, whatever. And this book had some of those feelings with Shallan of just like we're
Yeah, because we're
returning.
going to other characters.
Exactly. And so I think that in that way, she got a new role that I haven't necessarily experienced with Shallan before when she was much more of the main character
Yeah.
in the first 4 books. But pretty much every time she's on screen, I do think there's something interesting going on. And
Yeah.
I think where that begins is with the exploration of Vale, Radiant, and her personalities that,
Yeah.
and this kind of like question of what did it mean during Rhythm of War when she has that moment of I'm your Vale, Shallan, and kind of like
Right.
reincorporates Vale into her personality. We get that right up front.
Yeah, and coming off of that moment, Shalana is a lot more aware, a lot more accepting of her personas. So we do have Vale, who is still there. She's just described as being more a part of Shallan rather than a completely separate persona. And this part of Shallan she describes is the part of her that holds memories. Like you said, Vale is the veil between Shallan and the things that she didn't want to remember.
Mhm.
And now that has been reabsorbed into Shallan as a whole.
Yeah, and while you and I are not experts in terms of psychology or psychiatry, I do think this aligns quite well with what I know about real world DID and even more broadly, just this concept of speaking about yourself as parts of yourself.
Hmm.
So it's just like there is a part of me that is feeling anxiety. There is a part of me that is scared. There is a part of
Yeah.
me that is happy. And recognizing that maybe there is kind of like an operator above all of those things that is able to just observe. And maybe that's the Buddhist way of kind of explaining things like you're just sitting above and like these things are happening to parts of you, but it's not all of you that's consumed by this one emotion. And that's kind of what I felt Shallan was at a point of discovering that it was Vale is not a split personality. It's not something completely different or another alter, but it is part of her. And so it's not gone either.
Right. Yeah.
And she goes on to describe how Radiant still fits into something closer of an active alter
Yes.
and not what Vale has become. So Vale has been reincorporated, but Radiant at the beginning of the book has not.
Right. And Radiant is the part of Shallan that has the capacity to fight and kill. And so when Shallan feels that she is unable to take action in that way, she gives control over to the persona of Radiant. When she kills Mraize and she acknowledges and accepts the facts that she is not responsible for the bad decisions that the people around her have made. That's what enables her to then integrate Radiant into her being. And this is the moment that resolves this issue of, am I destined to always kill my mentors? She sort of comes to the conclusion that just because other people have done crappy things and like you kind of had to kill them does not mean that like you are responsible for that.
And we hear this quote, Shallan, Pattern said, are you healed?
That's not how it works, she said, feeling so exceptionally tired. It had been a very long day. I will always have to fight my mind's inclinations. It's not that I'm healed or even that Radiant is gone completely. She stood up, but I am better than I was. End quote.
And then by the time that we get to the epilogue, the verbiage about Radiant has now matched where we started with Vale.
Yeah.
She says, quote, the part of her that was Radiant, rather than referring to Radiant as a separate entity or a separate alter.
Yeah, the beginning of the book, when Radiant is in power, it will just say, you know, Radiant raised the sword and struck, etc. And then by the end of the book, that changes to saying the part of her that was Radiant felt XYZ thing or whatever. And so it's being very clear about the fact that Radiant is integrated into Shallan rather than being an entirely distinct persona.
Now, the interesting question that was brought up in Rhythm of War was, is there another altar?
Yeah.
And this concept of the formless.
Yes.
And we had a fear maybe that, you know, Shallan was losing control, like falling back, and that the formless was going to step in and fully take over. That is not what happened, but we did learn a little bit more about formless as the version of Shallan who becomes what the Ghostbloods want her to be. And this is, I think, different. This is like where we maybe leave any direct connections that people can make to real world DID.
Yeah.
And we get into the magical Cosmere stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because I have seen a little bit of discussion online sort of pointing out flaws in the DID depiction in Shallan. And I think it is really important for us to remember that although Shallan is inspired by DID, she's absolutely not meant to be a real world, you know, one for one analog. It is magical and it's a magical condition inspired by DID, but like she lives, you know, on Roshar with magic and therefore it's different.
And I think this is really kind of where we'll get into a lot more of the speculation near the back half of this episode. But this concept that we have of formless, for me, starts here. Quote, but formless, she's me, not an alternate persona, but a representation of me giving up. That is me if I just become what Mraize wants.
Yeah.
End quote.
This, to me, is more like Shallan's ability to see the potential of a person or like potential futures of a person that we see when she does her drawings. We're going to talk about this quite a bit more in kind of the second half of this episode, but I think that you're correct that this is sort of pointing towards something slightly different than what we see with the other personas.
Exactly. And I just want to call that out as like, if we're talking about formless, it's very much not an alternate. It's not something.
It's a possibility.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that is far more magical than any of the other alters that Shallan experiences, including the child.
Yeah, Shallan mentions this in the book for the first time. And I think you and I have speculated previously that maybe there is a child persona in Shallan, but this is the first time we've ever seen that on the page. And that's because Shallan has never acknowledged it. Like that is in-world true. And I would just point our audience to our episode from a few years ago. We did an interview with somebody who has DID, and we learned a lot about DID, which really helped us kind of put Shallan's experience into perspective. And so I would definitely recommend that episode if you've not listened to that already.
Yes, certainly a lot of great information and details. One of them being that for many people suffering from DID, a child alter is fairly common. It's like
Yeah,
one of the recurring types of alters that are described across cultures, across the world. And that's something now that we have with Shallan as well. And the child would be the innocent one, the one who before traumas started to kind of line up
right.
one after the other for Shallan, it is that person that she no longer is or can be and go back to, but the person that existed prior to those series of traumatic events.
One of the other big threads in Shallan's story is her interactions with Ja-Anat. She interacts with Ja-Anat several times, and I think this is just an important thing for us to keep in mind as we
Hmm.
continue into the second half of the Stormlight Archive. Ja-Anat has kind of been in the background, making some moves. She's, definitely still around, still doing stuff, and will be for the back half. And at the end, Shallan tells Ja'anat, "Hey, eventually you're gonna have to pick a side. Like, it was not cool that you pitted me and Mraize against each other, and we're just like, well, whoever frees Mishram first, then like I will, I'll be on your side." And Ja'anat says something very interesting. She's like, I was just trying to secure survival for myself and quote those she loves, end quote. I am not totally clear on who that is. I think that probably encompasses the Spren
Hmm.
that Ja-Anat has enlightened. I am curious if it's also the other unmade.
I think that's pretty good speculation. We know that Stormfather and Night Watcher refer to the sibling as the sibling, and it wouldn't be crazy to think of the unmade seeing each other as something akin to siblings.
And we just don't know what their origin story is
Exactly.
still. So who knows where they came from and what their relationship was prior to becoming unmade. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing for us to continue to percolate on as we look forward to the back half.
Yeah, and I'm slightly in favor of Jana's strategy here
Yeah.
because when Shallan is like, "Hey, it wasn't cool that you pitted Mraize and myself to free Mishram," I'm like, "Yeah, it was. Like that's a great strategy. Like sow as many seeds as possible. Like I'm you just sorry, lame Mraize had to die." And Shallan was threatened. But from Jana's perspective, she's like, I don't care about any of you. Like, I care about the things that I care about. It makes sense. I'll put it that way. It
Yeah.
makes sense from a character perspective to view things from Jana's perspective and say, yeah, of course, pit these little humans against because it might further
Of
Jana's
course.
goals.
I find her so interesting, and I'm very curious to see her storyline continue to play out. And then we have kind of the epilogue, the wrap up of Wind and Truth, where we get so many interesting tidbits to take us into this liminal space between arcs 1 and 2. Shallan is trapped in Shadesmar after Retribution is created and there's no more Stormlight. She makes her way to Cultivation's perpendicularity, but it is empty because Cultivation has fled the system. This journey to the perpendicularity has taken months.
Hmm.
And then when she realizes that she might never make it back to Roshar and to Adolin, she cradles her stomach. That is the word that is used, cradles. And then she thinks, quote, she could survive. She had to, not just for herself, end quote. This, of course, is one of the biggest areas of speculation post Wind and Truth because it seems like Shallan is pregnant.
Really lit the message boards and the
Yeah.
internet a storm. Nobody really uses message boards anymore. We're all on different discords.
17th shard.
Yeah, okay, that's perfect. And it was, immediately speculated upon. Almost all of the theories going forward talking about Shallan, someone's in the comments being like, well, that doesn't make sense because she's
But
pregnant.
what about the baby?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This was totally one of the things that threw me for a loop. I might have talked about this in our very first Wind and Truth episode almost a year ago now, but I'm just left with so many questions about the future of Shallan in general. Because I
Hmm.
think in so many ways she has been set up to be this Cosmere scholar, sort of Shadesmar ambassador. Like she is always looking and learning about the greater Cosmere. And I was really excited for that to be part of her journey. But now she is trapped in Shadesmar, which on one hand seems like it would be a great jumping off point
Right.
for that journey. Like, oh, cool. This is when, she meets Chris and Silverlight and she takes her natural history drawing kind of interest and she takes it to the whole Cosmere. So on one hand, it's a perfect setup, but then there's all of these things working against that. For one, Adolin.
Yeah.
Like, I like their relationship. I don't think that it would be very true to the characters for Shallan to just be like, well, I'm off on an adventure. Bye, husband. I guess I'll like never see you again. That seems very out of character. And then especially if she's pregnant, how is she gonna go be a Cosmere scholar if she's got a baby? So I don't really understand where she's going because I'm going to be really disappointed if she's not able to capitalize on the path that she's sort of been going down for 5 books. But I'm also going to be disappointed if she does something so out of character as to just like leave her husband or her baby or whatever and just be like, bye, I'm off.
Yeah, there's, again, just everything we could possibly talk about is really tied together around this baby. Because, like, when people are speculating about Adolin in the back half,
Right.
they're all saying and discussing, like, oh, well, what is it going to be like for him to be an absentee father
Right.
and, not be able to be there when his child is? He going to, like, reflect some of the problems? And it's just like all of it is now surrounding this
A potential
a
baby.
baby that doesn't exist, right? Like a baby that we are speculating exists. And I will put out there because I'm the one that everybody likes to make fun of. I don't think there's any baby. I think there's no baby. I don't think that there's a baby. And I don't.
There's like one bump in the road and you're just like, no.
It's not a baby. There is no baby because it breaks all my theories. It breaks all the fun
Right,
speculation.
yeah.
I think that yes, it's a possibility. It's one of the things that an author might write and like put in there, and then he can point back to, oh, I did say cradle that one time, and that means there's a baby. Versus, I wrote cradle because cradle is a word that makes sense, and then he just moved on.
No,
I know
no.
it's wrong. I know it's wrong, people. However, I'm gonna put it out there. I'm not excited about Shallan being pregnant and what that means for her story because it just, as it should.
Yeah,
I want to make this clear.
You're very distressed about the potential for a child to be raised in Shadesmar.
I think that as it should, when a child is introduced, the child becomes the focus of everything. You can't have a story about Adolin that doesn't involve his child. You can't have a story about Shallan that doesn't involve her child. It's just now everything is about that child. What does it mean to be a child born in Shadesmar and raised for 10 years or
Right.
however long it happens to be before they get out? What does it mean to be the grandchild of a herald? And like so on and so forth. Just like every question becomes focused on the child. And I don't know if I'm naturally ready for those type, like just every story to go down to, well, she can't do that because child. She has to do this because child. However, I also would understand if Brandon was writing it and be like, well, she can't leave because she has a child with Adolin, so she's staying on Roshar. And like
Yeah.
it would make sense in the one hand, but that's also why I'm like, I want the whole Cosmere to be open to her and all possibilities to be open.
I mean, I will say that it would be nice to see someone be a parent and also a superhero.
Okay.
Because I just think you don't see it very often because it's
Sure.
difficult.
Yeah.
But I think that it can be a really powerful portrayal for, so many of us that are parents
That's a good
to
point.
feel like they can see their own experience reflected and that they don't have to either have their identity, be completely subsumed in parenting or be completely separate from parenting. that the sort of struggle that an Adolin or a Shallan might go through in like, wow, I really want to be there for my kid. I really want to, do all of these things with them. And also, like, I have my own interests and I have my own passions and I want to do these other things. And I think it would actually be like kind of cool to see that portrayed in a fantasy world.
Your description right there actually just turned me around completely, because now
I did it.
I'm thinking about like the child altar that we were just talking about with Shallan,
Yeah.
and now the mother altar. And I think that
Oh, yeah,
for
sure.
a lot of women who become mothers and men who become fathers, those roles become their personalities. They become a real example of an altar for people not suffering from DID, but just like
Yes.
it is like the thing that they become. And it would be interesting to explore that and just kind of like see how that plays out
Yeah.
with Shallan, who is less struggling with the original altars of Veil and Radiant.
Right.
And
Yeah.
she starts dealing with just a much more natural kind of
Right.
version of that, of like, what does it mean to be a mother? But what does it mean to be a Radiant? And
Yeah.
that's like what she could explore in the back half. So you've kind of changed my mind on this as we are talking about it. And I would love to hear from listeners just kind of like what you think, do you think the
Yeah.
baby is
Did you
100%
catch
happening?
this
Yeah.
sentence when you read it? Because it's only the one sentence really that specifically calls it out. When I went back and looked, I do think that the second quote about like she needs to survive not just for herself is also potentially a reference to the baby. When I first read it, I just thought, she was talking about Adolin and all of the other people who are like relying on her.
Just the entire planet. Just every single person
Yeah.
on the planet needs her to do really good at being a Radiant. But of course, we're all just so selfish. We're just like, oh, I want that baby. I want that secret pregnancy because they had the one sexy shower scene.
Yeah, I mean, then there's that. It's like, well, why would you include that if you weren't going to capitalize on it?
Because people can have sex. We're okay with just regular, not teenagers. They're probably in their 20s at this point.
I mean, I think Shallan is like 19.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, they had sex more than once, folks. I'm just going to put that out there. I think where I would like to bring us back is within the epilogue, there are additional things that happen, including conversations with Thydakar.
Yes, and we've already talked a little bit about the real meat of that conversation, but the sort of Shallan pertinent things is she talks to Thydakar via the Sion. She finds out about the slowness bubble around Roshar. What she thinks has been a few months as she's been traveling to the perpendicularity has actually been years for Scadrial. And then Thydakar says, quote, "We've had our own crisis here recently," end quote. Knowing that years have passed since Hoyd first landed on Scadrial, this could possibly indicate that at this point in the epilogue, we are near the end of the Lost Metal, where that crisis has happened.
This is really hard timeline stuff, but I am, willing to put it out there. We also know from the text that the time dilation is going to be worse at the beginning.
Right.
Or right after the birth of Retribution. And then it's going to slowly wane.
Yes.
And so I think we could have here a marker for where we're at in the story. I think something like 5 months goes by for Shallan and 6.5 years goes by for Scadrial.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
Yeah, and then like we would see 10 more years play out for Shallan, but that fills up the remainder of time, whatever that difference happens to be. Because my speculation is still that we might get to like era 3 by the time we have Stormlight Archive 2. Does that make sense?
You think Arc 2 is going to be concurrent with Ghostbloods?
Yes, which is like supposed to be 70 to 100 years in the future.
And then do you think era 4 is post Arc 2?
Yes, exactly. That's where I would place things. Now, could be wrong, but I'm thinking like the time dilation might get us 70 plus years for Scadrial.
Yeah.
And that's based on how much time goes by in just a few months. Because yes, I agree with
Right.
you. I think that we're looking at 6.5 years, which is the beginning of Era 2, Alloy of Law, to the end of the Lost Metal, which would be the
Right. So
Crisis.
we sort of see references to both the beginning and the end of Mistborn Era 2 in Wind and Truth.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of time very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, that's speculation. It's too hard to have an exact knowledge until Brandon wants to say and be
Yeah.
very clear. I'm sure people are going to be asking all the time, like, how does this line up? How much time has gone by? So on and so forth. But
Yeah.
we'll get that in the future and then we'll talk about it in more detail then.
There is another kind of detail that I think could potentially be setting us up for Mistborn Ghostbloods, aka Era 3 of Mistborn. Thydakar says, quote, I doubt Ayatel's brother will insist on coming to seek vengeance against you immediately. He's more likely going to try to break away from me. So I might have a little civil war on my hands. If his agents do arrive on Roshar, they'll be your enemies. End quote. But I think this reference to a potential Ghostblood civil war might be part of the storyline of Era 3. I mean, that sounds like a pretty cool storyline.
Yeah, and, makes sense with the title. I also think that it would be, are they going to lose the Civil War and that's why they go to Roshar? Going to Roshar, if you're outside the bubble, it seems like a horrific idea. Like, why would you
Yeah.
ever go from Scadrial and then to Roshar unless you had to, unless you were somehow forced to?
Which is kind of why I think Thydakar is saying he's probably not gonna
Go immediately.
Yeah.
Right, because it's like, it's too terrible
Right.
and, too much of a punishment. But yeah, basically, you'd be leaving behind a life, whatever life that happened to be, to go step onto a planet that is covered in darkness and owned by retribution. Like, it's not my first
Not great.
spot on the vacation list.
And then at the end of this conversation with Thydakar, the Sion Allah enters the employ of Shallan as recompense for everything that Thydakar put her through. Allah is going to be reporting back to Thydakar about the events on Roshar. So Shallan is at least aware that there is going to be some kind of back channel conversation happening. And then we do hear that Allah is able to contact another Sion Olo, which is Wit's former Sion, and that Sion is still on Roshar. Shallan tells Allah to sort of relay the request that Olo go to Azamir so that she's able to contact Adolin. I think on third read, I do think that this is maybe another part that sort of pointed me towards potential baby, just in the way that it's phrased in the book. There's a little bit of extra weight on Shallan's thought process of like, okay, I need to like have a conversation with Adolin.
Gonna be an awkward one.
Yeah, which like at first, just someone says, I'm gonna have a conversation with my husband. You're like, oh yeah, I mean, that sounds normal, of course. But then, yeah, as I went back to it, I was like, oh, this is kind of phrased in like a slightly strange way that makes it a little bit more weighty. That makes me think maybe she's calling him to be like, hey man, good news, also bad news because I'm stuck in Shadesmar.
And we have seen the Sions be used as kind of more like a hologram projection. So, a lot, again, speculation all surrounds the baby's existence.
Yeah.
And therefore people are like, oh, well, the baby will be able to communicate with Adolin in this way. And it'll be like there, but not there. And like kind of be able to raise him.
Yeah. Cause then there's also a lot of speculation around, are they really going to go 10 years without figuring out else gates? It seems like in 10 years, Yasno Colin could figure out how to make an else gate and like get Shallan back. But I don't know. I think one, it would be disappointing if Shallan was able to get back to Roshar and it happened like off screen.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of like the other problematic element here is that we have a timeline that is supposed to exist, which is 10 years between Stormlight Archive 5 and Book 6. People want to see the things happen to these characters.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you're like, wait, if there's a baby, then that means all of this stuff has to happen with Shallan and the baby locked in Shadesmar for 10 years.
Yeah.
Adolin, what's it going to be like to go 10 years without being
Right.
around his child, being around, and then like, what does that child become?
I
Because they're a super
know.
weird little half spren, quarter spren, whatever. Just like everyone's speculation is like, as I said, all wrapped up in how to answer these questions from the
Yeah.
little bit of evidence we seem to have. And I don't have answers. I just know that like every question is like surrounding this issue now.
Yeah, there's so many things all tied together,
Mhm.
and there's so much speculation that can be done, and not really any way to plant any of it in reality or groundedness. And speaking of reality, we should talk about Shallan's powers.
Yes.
So, one of the sort of big themes or kind of lore areas that we get in Shallan's storyline is surrounding her powers. And I'm just going to say her powers because there is still so much ambiguity around Shallan's oaths
Mhm.
slash truths. I read this passage so many times, just like over and over again, trying to figure out what exactly is happening. Presumably, it is the fourth ideal because she then gets her shard plate, but it's a really weird scene. Essentially, Shallan slash Radiant is in the Bead Ocean in Shadesmar. She's fighting Abadai the Monarch, and Shallan thinks about how she's supposed to be a master of Shadesmar because she has the transformation surge, but she's really only been able to make things with the Shadesmar beads by using the blueprint of a specific bead. She's not able to just command the beads to obey her. And then as Radiant is struggling against Abadai, Shallan says, quote, "My weapon has never been a blade, Radiant," end quote.
Radiant then immediately coaxes Shallan or encourages Shallan to say the words, setting up what we think is her fourth ideal.
And she says, quote, "I'm afraid, afraid of everything, terrified of the world, of what might happen to my family, most of all, of myself. I always have been," end quote. And that is seemingly the thing that does it. I am not really sure how this counts as the fourth ideal because I think that I'm terrified is like maybe her first ideal or second ideal that
Yeah,
happens
second.
way back in Way of Kings
Hmm.
when she says it to Pattern. And we have so many timelines of Shallan episodes at this point,
Yeah.
like trying to figure out what in the world is going on with her. And so I would, refer people back to those episodes if you need like a full recap of all of the questions and possibilities. But this just really confused me.
As it should, the way that I've dealt with that confusion in myself is to go completely off the deep end. I am so far out on a limb, and I just want to keep using every possible metaphor, simile, and crazy way to describe this. I think it's all nonsense. I think
What?
everything that we've ever thought and talked about, it's
Ideals are actually fake.
all ideals are fake.
Oh my
Every structure is fake. It is all part of, okay, stay with me. I'm going to deliver it, in a quick version.
Okay.
But it applies to everything. And that's where I can get a little too chaotic,
Yeah.
is how it applies to everything. But I think the confusion around Shallan's ideals, the confusion of having two spren bonds, the confusion of being the daughter of a herald, all comes back to this moment. I think it is very important. I think it will be something that is pointed to in our future, and Brandon will look at it in the past and be like, this is where things diverged. And I
Mhm.
started to try to tell you everything Tyler's about to describe right now.
Yeah.
Obviously kidding, folks. But I think that the reason why we can't clearly line up the ideals with the powers that Shallan is getting, the truths that she is saying, is because the rules are defined by the Spren. And if the Spren wants something to be different, then it is different. If the Spren wants
Mm.
to be a blade in the first ideal, I think they can. If the Spren wants armor at the second ideal, I think they can. If the
Yeah.
Spren believes in the bond strongly enough then it doesn't have to be a strict requirement. The requirements come from Honor, who is a known piece of shit. As we know, he is the entity that is trying to apply rules. Surges don't have rules. Surges are a manifestation of Investiture's existence in the Cosmere.
Yeah, I totally take your point, and I think that that is correct. I think the question, as you're saying, is when Honor's involvement comes into play, because I
Mhm.
think for sure there is some aspect of Honor's power in the structure of the Knights Radiant orders. Now, the question is that still intact, even though the vessel of Honor is dead? Obviously, the power is still there. Where we really see a big change happen in the Spren and Spren's abilities, for example, their ability to even leave Roshar,
Mhm.
is when Mishram is freed and cultivation leaves.
Yeah, and that's like
Yeah,
when all of the kind of bonds or ties break
right.
for
And whatever Kaladin does. I get Kaladin's
the new
oath
protection.
pact thing.
Yeah, the new
I
protection.
don't really understand what exactly happens there. We'll talk about that in Kaladin's episode, but whatever happens there also seems to have something to do with it. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that the restrictions and the structure of ideals is still present at this point at the beginning of the book.
I think it's fading because Honor is not there to enforce it anymore. So it's the remnant of an agreement.
Eh,
It is the momentum that has existed in the past. But at any time, as we will eventually see, as you just described at the end of the book,
mhm.
be like the rules
Yeah.
are not universal rules. They were just being enforced by something. And then as soon as that thing that is enforcing them goes away, it's not a rule anymore. And so
I
it's,
know, but it's like that thing kind of went away, but also kind of didn't go away.
yes, it's
So,
somewhere in
yeah.
a fluctuation, or it's on a spectrum of like the strict rules of ideals and, honors bonds that he encourages and helps develop, which we see in the spiritual realm. So like we see all this stuff happening in the past and he's talking about the rules, but we even see this on display with the shards themselves. They make agreements.
Yeah.
And then, as Wit tells us, and we talked about in our last episode, as soon as the vessel changes, the agreements, the bonds that were agreed to, no longer apply to the new vessel in the same way. There
Yeah.
might be echoes of the agreement. There might be a new type of retribution can't make a pact or a new bond, and that might apply to him. But the old stuff doesn't apply anymore. I'm saying that for Shallan and for all of our Radiants, the rules as they previously existed don't necessarily apply, which is why we get to what I think is Shallan's most important realization line from the book
Yeah.
and her best understanding, like the thing of true importance for Shallan comes in this moment. And you want to intro us into that?
Yeah. As we start to go into these other important things about Shallan, I am curious. You know how in Way of Kings, Shallan is convincing herself that she has to wait 10 heartbeats to summon her shard blade?
Exactly.
I'm curious if the ideals are a similar thing.
I would
That
agree.
like maybe Shallan, as the daughter of a herald, doesn't actually need to say ideals to do some of these things. Like she has innate power and abilities, but she has built-in sort of protections for herself of like saying, no, I actually I have to say the ideal to do
Mhm.
that. And that eventually we'll find out that that's why her ideals, quote unquote, are so crazy, like truly just off the walls bonkers, because they're not actually necessary and she doesn't actually like need to be saying these ideals.
Yes, and you tie that to her extra thing, which is she's
Yes.
the daughter of a cognitive shadow.
Yes.
I don't think that it even needs to go there. I just think that's another confusing layer on the Shallan onion.
Right, because you're talking about this moment that happens right after she says theoretically
Her
this
fourth
fourth
ideal.
ideal or just says the words as Radiant calls it.
Mhm.
The beads kind of begin to stir around her. Shallan becomes filled with stormlight. Her eyes begin to glow. So all of these things that point to saying an ideal, this is a very like average, response to saying a new ideal. Then an illusion of Radiant appears behind Abadai, and Radiant is able to stab Abadai and successfully wound him. So this illusion has mass. And we hear, quote, reality, Shallan hissed, is what I decide it to be, end quote.
That's the moment that I think is most important for Shallan and maybe for all of the Radiants, for everyone. Like this is the pivot moment around
Oh, you think
things.
this is like maybe a universal thing? I thought this was very specific to Shallan.
No, I think it is the broader concept within the Cosmere that ideas can influence investiture, and investiture left alone by
Okay, yeah,
itself
sure.
can start to become aware. Like I think it's all tied up in this line. Reality is what I decide it to be is true because she has access to surges, and the surges are a way of manipulating reality.
I don't know. I think this is a unique thing. Maybe unique to Lightweavers, but maybe unique just to Shallan.
But it is not a unique thing only to Shallan. I think yes to maybe the first point, the Lightweavers, because Abadai recognizes this. And that is, Shallan can't be recognized as the daughter of a herald. He would not recognize that. Nobody would recognize that. But what he says immediately afterwards is, quote, he took her in, then glanced at Radiant, made physical, his eyes narrowing as he hummed to a discordant rhythm. You have learned substantiation? I thought your kind had forbidden that skill. Odium will need to know. End quote. This is a power and ability that was banned to the Radiants, or at least to the Lightweavers. And Abadai
Yeah.
knows that, recognizes it, and he thinks it's something important enough that he needs to go immediately report it back to Odium.
I think the thing with Shallan that we always have to remember is that it's always and. It's never or. So like yes, this is a Lightweaver thing. And there's also more
Right.
going on
That's true.
in the same moment that has to do with her being a herald. And there also is a layer of her two spren bonds. So that maybe this is an ability that some Lightweavers did have in the ancient times. Maybe Shallan is able to access it earlier and easier because of her two spren bonds. And maybe she is able to add a layer to the process that no other Lightweaver would be capable of because of her herald skill. I think it's always a layering of different things because we kind of see this with Kalak too, and I'm sort of pushing us forward in our outline a little bit, but Kalak also recognizes something in her where he's like, "Oh yes, here's like this kind of strange, unique skill that you have. That's probably because of your two spren bonds. Is that true?" Like maybe a little bit, but it's also probably a little bit because of her heraldness, and he doesn't call that part out, but it's there also.
I think that's a great point. Shallan is always the yes and, not
Yes.
the either or. But we see this on display in Oathbringer at the Battle of Thalen Field. She is
Right.
sending out images that have weight and mass and are slowing down other people.
Yeah, so I did find this a little bit curious as well because it's being called out so strongly in this instance of her manifesting Radiant and that Radiant is this real physical presence. Even Shallan has a moment or two where she's like, "Oh, weird, like Radiant is so has so much mass." Which yeah, just flagged in my mind where I was like, "Didn't you like you already did this? Why are you surprised? What exactly is different about Radiant having mass when previously you made an entire army of illusions with at least some mass?"
Yeah, I think the sum is probably the defining feature that she's uniquely interested in this time. I felt like at Thalen Field, she was sending out the image of a person that had maybe like 5 pounds of mass. And so it had a little bit of weight. And like
Mhm.
when it hit someone, it kind of felt like something, but it wasn't blocking that person. Whereas I feel here, Radiant could have stood in front of Abadai and been like pushing against them. And Abadai couldn't go through them like an illusion.
Yeah, well, and the fact that not only the person is substantial, but the weapon is real enough to actually injure Abadai.
Exactly. And so it's definitely an evolution of the powers. To me, the reason why I'm not rushing to label this a herald ability or the daughter of a herald ability, but maybe something to do with her dual spren bond is because it does seem to come after an ideal was said. And so it does
Mhm.
just seem like she had this power in a more basic way. She set an ideal and now she can do it in a more dramatic way. That's how all of the radiant abilities work.
Do you think is this what Radiant is trying to say when or maybe it's Shallan, whatever. One of them earlier is saying, "Oh no, my real weapon was never a blade." Like, do you think she's referring to this manifestation ability?
I think that her real weapon is her mind, her words, and the broader concept of just like what Kalak gets into eventually of she has a ability, maybe Herald inspired, maybe just Radiant inspired, but she can see and like draw from the spiritual realm, maybe
Yes.
to like make things happen as she wants them to happen. That is reality warping, as like in anybody who follows comic books, like that's always the top tier power. Like there is nothing else that's more
Yeah,
powerful.
it's very Scarlet Witch coded.
100%. Just like
Yeah.
there's the scene in Endgame or one of the Avengers when Scarlet Witch like comes down on the battlefield and like throws a bunch of stuff with her powers, and then everyone else like looks and like, why was she up in the building like hiding? Like where's she been the whole time? Like she's the one that is so strong and capable because that's what a reality warper can do.
And this is also a moment when I think we maybe are getting hints at Shallan's other ability. I know we keep referencing it. We're gonna get there in just a second. But Shallan then says, quote, "It had felt wonderful to manifest Radiant, a part of her stepping out and becoming real," end quote. I think this is potentially a cousin to what we were talking about earlier with Formless. This being a not only a manifestation of a persona of Shallan's, but this manifestation that is kind of reaching into the spiritual realm in
Mm-hmm.
some way and making part of her a real thing.
And this is
That is I think I
mhm.
do think that there's a little bit of daylight here in between specifically manifesting radiant and creating illusions with mass.
I agree. I think that what she has done is grab an altar from Shallan, a part of her, and then she has imagined something in the future, a radiant that she could become, a person that she could become. And she has drawn that out of the spiritual realm and then slammed those two things together and given birth to
Mm,
what we see on the screen.
yeah.
And this is where Tyler goes really off the deep end because, fun fact, that's exactly what happens with the Blackthorn. Doesn't
Oh my
require
gosh.
illusions at all. It is the creation of the Blackthorn is a spiritual realm being that Dalinar connects to pieces of himself and slams the two together, giving birth to a new thing that is going to be known as the Blackthorn. I
I
know,
can't go down that
I
rabbit hole. You
know,
you
I
need to
know,
stop doing this because
I
we
know.
literally can't take a 2-hour tangent.
That's the problem. This is a magical thing. This is different than just the altars. This is something I think is what Kalak gets to eventually. And so I want to read that quote. He says, quote, "Do you often draw upon fortune, glimpse someone's possible selves and pull one forth, touch in some small way what could have been, might still be," end quote. He goes on to speculate that this might be because of her two spren bonds, saying that odd things happen when the hell bonds overlap. And there used to be rules, Honor, against having more than one bond. There are no rules. The rules are all fabrications.
Well,
And
that we
it's
don't know that.
these two,
We don't
yeah,
know
but
that.
these two spren that Shallan has, Pattern and Testament, are in violation of whatever old rules there used to be. But the rules are more like guidelines.
I mean, I think there's also maybe a loophole in that Testament was a Deadeye.
Yeah, it might
Yeah.
be easier because Testament is a Deadeye, but
Yeah.
as we know with Maya, a Deadeye isn't a Deadeye forever. Like a Deadeye can give you powers. A Deadeye can help you manifest radiant abilities. It's just done in a different way. So yeah, a loophole or a workaround.
Yeah.
But we have three things going on really with Shallan. She's the daughter of a herald. She is a radiant in truth with Pattern. And then
Well, yeah.
and then she has a secondary different radiant bond with Testament.
Yeah. And like if she rehabilitates Testament,
Hmm.
do they pick up where they left off? You know, is she then a double fourth ideal and third ideal radiant? Or does she have to go back and say all of the ideals again to Testament? I don't think we have an answer to that, but a question
Yeah.
there.
Hit us up with what you think. Obviously, my answer here is no, she doesn't need to go back and say the rules because Testament's been on the journey with her,
Yeah,
listening to all of the truths.
I
Like, it's
think that's
fine.
right, in particular because we hear specifically that the bond was not completely broken
Yeah.
because Shallan didn't fully intend to kill Testament, that there was like part of her, you know, that still loved Testament and didn't actually mean, you know, I want you to die.
Hmm.
And so the bond is maintained, which is why she is able to, you know, continue summoning her blade at faster than 10 heartbeats and things like that. Then there's this other, I know we keep just like tacking on weird abilities that Shallan has, but there's a lot of them and we're gonna keep going.
We didn't write the books, people.
Yeah. There's also a moment when Shallan is like peeking at Mraize in the cognitive realm, and she thinks to herself, like, oh, maybe I could just jump into the cognitive realm fully, even though regular Lightweavers are not supposed to be able to do that. Like, they're supposed to be able to just do the little peek, but not necessarily fully jump in all on their own. And I think, again, this is maybe because she has two bonds and so her surges are like extra strong, or is because of her weird spiritual web on account of being the child of a herald. I think she may eventually be able to use either her soul casting powers or her herald baby powers to fully like change herself in between realms.
That would be an interesting, like, Yasna doesn't need to solve the problem. Shallan solves a problem for herself. She steps
Yeah.
out of the cognitive realm back
Yeah.
into the physical world. I could, I could see this as a flashback situation where Shallan is giving birth to a baby. And in that moment, she goes from being in the cognitive realm to
Oh,
the
that would be
physical realm.
wild.
Yeah. Cause like, giving birth scene is always like a huge
Yeah, just like
moment
a
in,
surge of power. And then
yeah.
she's like, oh, look, I appeared on the floor of
Yeah,
Urithiru.
because like Adolin's gonna be there via Sion, so he's gonna be like standing over her. She's connected to him. She's connected to the baby. She's connected to Herald powers, and she like does the thing then. And that's like how you get out of it while you still write the scene. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just crazy,
Yeah,
Tyler.
yeah.
But this is the first real moment when I start to say that's Herald baby powers.
Oh.
That is the thing
Mhm.
that is unique to Shallan, because the Spren are limited by the beliefs they have in themselves as Spren. So an honor Spren wants to be an honor Spren and believes that an honor Spren is something specific. One of those options is like, I bond a Radiant and we use gravitation and adhesion powers. But like the Spren can't necessarily change fundamentally who they are. Thoughts about Spren might be able to. That's a different discussion. But I think the Spren are wrapped up in themselves in a way that doesn't allow for the fluctuation of powers. The Heralds, a being of pure investiture, a cognitive shadow, doesn't have any rules whatsoever. Like, I think that they are.
I mean, I think they do have rules.
I don't think they have anything whatsoever, especially now that Honor is dead.
They
Like,
would be shards if they had no rules, and even the shards have rules.
no, they are tiny, tiny little baby pieces of a shard. They are a. I think that what we are seeing here when Shallan is wondering, hey, could I just be an else caller, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
She's like, I could just transition, not like a Lightweaver, but I could be an else caller. That's just surges on display. Surges are just uses of investiture.
Yeah.
She is a being of investiture. Technically.
Partially.
Everything is a being of investiture.
Yeah, exactly.
But, she is half a being of investiture. And therefore, I think once she realizes that and acknowledges that her mom and all of the other heralds are doing this all the time. They're constantly moving between physical and
not really. And I think we have to back up. We have to actually talk about
reel it in.
Shallan's parentage before we do more of this.
Have you guys not got that yet? Are we are we clear enough on this one?
We've been talking about it a lot, but let's actually like talk about the scene that we see in the book, and then we can move on from there
Mhm.
because Shallan meets her mom, meets I would say the cognitive shadow of her mom, but her mom has always been a cognitive shadow. Um, in a vision, Shallan is in a vision of her own wedding in the spiritual realm. And
As we saw at the World Hopper Ball 2024.
correct, we also were present in this vision.
We were in the background. Oh, that's me. Way over there.
And Shallan sees her and then is tempted to ignore her and to just like block it out to go back to being surrounded by love and reliving her wedding day instead of facing this person who brings up so many painful memories. But Radiant encourages Shallan to fight instead of just giving into ignorance. And Radiant also refuses to fight for her in this moment. She really forces Shallan to take the forefront and have this confrontation with her mom.
And while we do think everybody knows, Chana, the Herald, Shallan's mom, she is in really bad condition
Yeah, she's
in this
not she's
vision.
not doing great.
She is, when confronted, she kind of like shrinks down into a ball. She's overwhelmed by self-hatred. She calls herself selfish for wanting to have a family. She blames herself for the current desolation. She
Yeah,
wishes.
she says like, "Oh, I wish that I hadn't gotten married. I hadn't pursued this dream of having a family, but I thought I was doing okay." And then she says all of the heralds kind of think they're doing okay. Like none of them think that they're crazy, even Ishar, and they're all wrong.
And that is a very interesting question. Be like, is the only reason, Chana, that you wanted to have a family because you were suffering from thousands of years of torture and like your mind was broken in the same way that Ashar
No,
wants
I
to be God?
mean, I think she just wanted to be normal for a hot second, you
Right. But
know?
that's like, that is a, I'm using this
I mean,
word
I
with
don't I
air
don't
quotes.
think that's crazy. I think
I think for her, it is a psychosis. It is, she is not normal. None of the heralds are normal. They are cognitive shadows. They are not real. This is like my big point that I keep, they are ghosts. Ghosts do not get to step back into the physical realm and have normal lives. That's how
well, they
you just
don't
find
have
like the
normal
exorcism.
lives.
That's like this is the bad thing that ghosts want. They want to like relive their lives. They can't let go. Chana is a herald. Chana wanting to have a family, and this is so many different things wrapped up here. But she remarks that it was like part of her magical malady that she was maybe trying to escape for why she
No,
starts
she
this family.
no, she says, "I thought I was doing okay,
Mhm.
but I made a mistake sort of entangling myself in a family when I was not well," because she recognizes that
Mhm.
she brought a lot of heartache to her children that obviously that wouldn't have happened if she hadn't had children. And then she says that when she returned to Braze, she really tried to hide and to withstand the torture, but she broke, as we know, starting this new desolation.
Bringing us all the way back to Way of
Yeah.
Kings, where Shallan says, all of this is my fault. And we have the bookend now and like the on text acknowledgement of what a lot of speculation we had been dealing with for years is that the final desolation started because Chana broke. Tal never broke. The
Right.
Everstorm did not bring everything back. There was
Correct.
a normal desolation caused by Herald breaking. That herald was Chana. The reason Chana died, unlike all of the other heralds, is because Shallan killed her.
Right. And then when Taln returns, Chana also is returned, but seemingly she has been killed in the meantime because
Right.
in this scene, Chana is currently in the cognitive realm on Braze and is able to make this jump into the spiritual realm, like into this spiritual representation of herself. And then at the end of this vision, she says, quote, "They've found me, the souls of the dead singers, the fused who have not returned. I'm looking for Taln. I won't break this time. I will find him."
Souls of the dead? Mother? Shallan said. Where am I right now?
"Inside a vision," Chana said, "in the spiritual realm, reliving your wedding. I died again a few months ago. I was on Braze in the cognitive realm, but I felt you calling, pulling me to you." End quote. Why did she die? How did she die?
Yeah, how did she die is a big question because we
How
see Taln and Ash fight and kill a bunch of people before dying. So like, did Chana have a
what
moment like that?
what is Chana doing the whole time, right? Like throughout the entirety of Way of Kings, all the way up until till this point. She's on Roshar somewhere.
hmm
What is she doing? And then eventually she gets killed, apparently. I don't know. I have so many questions for Chana Mama.
Interestingly, we have Pattern, who I'm gonna say is agreeing with me because I love Pattern, and
Okay.
he says, "quote Rules are odd for heralds who are beings of all realms." End quote.
He doesn't say there are no rules.
He says
Please,
they're odd.
please note. He says they're odd. They do exist, though.
Reality is what we decided to be.
Reality is apparently what Tyler thinks it should be.
Nope, just what Shallan thinks it should be. I think that yeah, the rules are odd. We know that there is a cognitive shadow of Chana. We are told that that cognitive shadow is on Braze.
Right.
Shallan is in the spiritual realm. Chana's cognitive shadow is pulled into the spiritual realm for that vision.
I think probably not entirely, right? Because she also says that the fused
Are hunting her.
they're
Yeah.
like, oh, they found me. So some part of her is still manifested in the cognitive realm for the fused to find.
And I think this is exactly what Kaladin is eventually able to do, is create a little pocket universe out of spiritual realm something, but pull a piece of the heralds who are going to remain on Braze, and also part of them is going to
Oh,
exist in the pocket universe to
yeah.
heal and rest.
Well, and I was just thinking this is kind of what we were just talking about with Shallan, potentially, that she's able to kind of sit in the border of the realms.
Right.
Whereas most people kind of need to be in either one or the
Yeah.
other. They have to cross the threshold. And
Oh,
Shallan's kind of able to stand on the threshold of being both in the cognitive realm and in the physical realm at the same time. And Chana is doing the same thing just from cognitive to spiritual.
that's very interesting because it reminds me of the scene that Dalinar has when he views people stepping through the Elf's Gate, the original one from Ashen
Oh,
to
yeah.
Roshar.
That's Navani's perspective, actually.
Okay, but
Yeah.
when they see the like
There's
tunnel,
like a little gap.
there is a
Mhm.
gap.
She
There's
says it's about 6 inches.
right.
And it's like she says it's like they step into a conveyance almost,
Mhm.
that they're like traveling through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it kind of like ports them, it teleports them. But there is a thing. It's not like an instantaneous flat surface.
Right.
Like there's something on the
Yeah.
border.
Yeah.
And maybe, yeah, Shallan can feel the border, understand that the border is there, and then eventually be able to, manifest the border. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the story His Dark Materials
Yep.
with the
I
subtle
was just
knife,
thinking the same thing.
and just like being able to feel and touch and kind of manipulate the edges of the between realms.
All of this, of course, makes us ask the question, what does it mean to be the child of a herald? The closest example we really have is Ciri and Vivenna from Warbreaker, who are descendants of a returned, but
Mhm.
they're pretty far down the line
Generations.
from that returned ancestor. So they have the royal locks, which is this indication of their ability to change their physical forms like a returned can do. We see Vasher change his appearance a few different times, and he mentions to Vivenna that she has, I don't know if it would be the exact same strength of power to do
Right.
that, but she has some ability to do that as well.
And so like I think that's interesting because
So
we also see Wit do this in this story. We just talked about it last time. Wit is
yes.
able to physically change himself.
Yes.
And so the question would be like, is Wit able to do that because he has lots of investiture? Is it only a requirement of investiture? Or when it comes to Ciri and Vivenna, is it about some type of weird genetic aspect of being the
Right.
child
It's more
of a
of like
returned?
something written into your spiritual web
Yeah,
that you're able
exactly.
to do regardless of amount of investiture that you're actively holding.
I would say Wit and possibly anybody with lots of investiture can mimic the ability that for maybe Shallan and Ciri and Vivenna is innate.
I'm not going to speculate on wit at all.
Okay.
Because I think that's folly. Um,
He would love that though.
But I do think, yeah, I think there's a question, like, do we think that this is an ability that Shallan would also have? Like, is this
100%.
an ability that's tied to simply cognitive shadowness? Or is this something that is specific to returned? Because also the returned come back in their physical bodies, their actual physical body, versus the heralds who do not have a physical body. There's not a corpse that they're coming back into. They are fully creating their body each time out of investiture. So does that change things? I don't know.
I mean, I would think for the heralds, they are doing something greater than the returned. The returned, and endowment is, a great example of this. She's working within a perfect ecosystem where like everything is kind of recycled, breaths cannot be taken.
Speculated.
Of course. But she's working within a system that does seem a little bit cyclical, kind of like the water cycle here on Earth, evaporation, precipitation. It just like goes around and around, but there's all the same water. Heralds are not doing that. They are doing something, in my opinion, greater when they manifest from nothing or from investiture a full physical body. I think if Ciri and Vivenna as the child of what I would consider a lesser being, a returned, and not even a child, a grandchild, if they can manipulate their physical form in the same way that Vasher can, who is a returned,
which we don't know if they can.
Not fully.
They can do something version of it. We don't know what the spectrum is.
Yeah. Then a herald who can do far more than that. They can build a body from nothing.
But we also don't see them change their bodies at all. Like once the body is made, we don't see any evidence that they are manipulating it after that. So do they have that ability and they're just not aware of it, similar to Ciri and Vivenna? Or do they not have that ability at all? They only have the ability to create and then it is fixed.
I'm thinking that all of the heralds come back in a way like the Court of the Gods, as like a perfect version of themselves.
I think some of them would probably change the way they look if they could.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But they might also like who they were. It's speculative, it's definitely out there.
So this is a question, and then I do think that this speaks to our conversation around Shallan, because this is a manipulation of the surge, speaking generally, not Roshar based, but the surge of transformation that exists that she already has access to via her spren bonds. And then if she also has access to enhanced manipulation of transformation of herself via heraldness, this maybe is, kind of an explanation for why it would be so much easier for her to manifest and substantiate illusions and things like that. So that is one possible ability that Shallan has some access to as the child of a herald, as an immediate descendant of a cognitive shadow entity. I do think that she should have more abilities than someone like Ciri or Vivenna, who is getting these things diluted down through the gene pool.
Yeah.
So theoretically, Shallan, there's a whole lot that Shallan can do, has access to, that maybe we don't even know to speculate about.
I would think it's like what we see with a beat of Lerasium, creating a super powered Mistborn in Ellen.
Oh,
but then a diluted trend of Mistborn for generations after that. That in this example, Ciri and Vivenna are a normal Mistborn.
Right.
And Shallan has a beat of Lerasium one generation out.
Yeah. And so I think with Shallan's 2 spren bonds and all of these unknown abilities of herald descendants, do you think that Shallan is maybe one of the most powerful people in the Cosmere that we know of?
I think that removing someone like a Dawn Shard from the conversation.
Okay.
Removing any shards or splinters kind of that have directly touched shard power. And certainly removing Wit, who fits, several of those things.
Removing Wit for sure.
but I think after that, you would be hard pressed to find someone who is better positioned to be more powerful than Shallan. I don't think she necessarily is until she realizes that she can be whatever she wants to be. But she's better positioned than anyone in the Cosmere.
Yeah, I think just base model.
Exactly. Base model Shallan is really great.
Like, yeah, she is working with way more than anyone else. Like, honestly, I think even Slivers, like, she's more powerful than Slivers. I think she's more powerful maybe than Splinters. I don't know. I feel like she's got a lot going on.
You think that, just to be clear, a sliver is someone who has taken up the power of a shard and then
But no
abandoned
longer
it.
has it.
And,
yeah.
Okay.
And then they become a regular person again.
I think they're forever changed.
Yeah, there's some like residual impacts, but they're not, suddenly a superhero when they have given it up.
Okay. That's fair. She's very close to a sliver, but just not one that has touched a shard power directly. But she's like a sliver of this cognitive shadow herald. She's a piece of the herald.
I mean, yeah, she has like a splinter of a splinter.
She's a splinter of a splinter. That's a great understanding. I think base model Shallan is more powerful than almost everyone in the Cosmere.
Because plus she has the 2 Spren bonds, and I do think that does something.
I agree. It definitely does something.
Yeah.
And will continue to do something for her going forward.
And then the other thing that I want to say is that one of my speculations about perhaps what the Herald baby-ness of Shallan gives her is this ability to look into the spiritual realm, to do something like the abilities that we see in Mistborn granted by ATM and Mal ATM, the ability to see into the future, and then the ability to see who someone could be or might have been if they had taken a different path, or if they do take a different path. Shallan has demonstrated several times over the course of the books that she has this ability to draw people's portraits in this way of seeing who they have the potential to be. She does it with Mraize in Wind and Truth.
With Yalb, all the way back in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the example with Yalb and also the example with Bluth are really important because they seem to change the person in the present based on the information that Shallan has given them. She makes Bluth a better version of himself right now.
Yes.
By connecting the vision that she pulled from the spiritual realm about Bluth and showing that to him.
I don't necessarily know if that aspect of it is magical. I think that there is innate power in sort of showing someone that they have the capacity to be better, and that it might be that kind of mundane, beautiful thing that's happening that causes Bluth to be better. But the fact that she's able to touch the spiritual realm and depict something real, a real possibility for Bluth, not a sort of dramatized or imagined version of what he could be, but something that's real.
Yeah. And that's why I think it is magical, because I think she's forming a line of connection for Bluth to something beyond.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's maybe the difference between watching a movie, just making up an example right now, but watching a movie where Denzel Washington plays the president of the United States versus Barack Obama being the president of the United States to a young Black child. That kind of, you can watch a movie, but you're always going to know it's a movie versus seeing the first Black president.
Sure.
It's just going to be a different thing.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily anybody in the moment, but Shallan is able to connect those things in a very tangible way through magic.
Yeah. And then she does the portrait of Yalb, and then later she does a drawing of Yalb and the rest of the crew emerging from the ocean after the shipwreck. Basically, she thinks they're all dead, and then she does a drawing of them surviving. And that's real. We later learn that they do survive.
Right. And what I never have known about that is, when did she draw it?
Right. Is she seeing it in the present, or is she predicting that they will survive?
And then my follow-up question would be is she not predicting that they will survive? Did
she make it happen?
Yes.
Whoa! I did not think of that possibility.
Reality is what she decides it to be.
Yeah. I
and
love
she
that.
wanted that to be real. And I don't know that if the timeline actually lines up for they have to, because she's going through a traumatic event at that time. I don't know if she was consciously connected, but that is the big question with all of this, when you have two spren bonds, when you are so connected to the spiritual and cognitive realm as the daughter of a herald, and when you have direct access to investiture yourself.
Yeah, because this is why I think that it's always and.
Yeah.
It's totally possible that her double spren bond is giving her double access to the surge of illumination,
Mhm.
which is sort of here being used as spiritual illumination
Right.
to shed light on a person's potential or future. But then that's being supercharged
Right.
by her nature as a herald baby with sort of extra access to the cognitive realm and the spiritual realm that's enabling her to do exactly what she does. Do you want to hear my like out there back half of the Stormlight Archive theory for Shallan?
I've been waiting. 8 years I've been waiting.
Yeah.
Give me the craziness.
It's not that crazy.
Okay,
This is just
hit me with
like
it.
my potential thought for what Shallan could do in the back half.
Mhm.
I think that right now we have Kaladin sort of positioned as our herald ambassador, you know, from our main crew.
Okay, therapist Kaladin, yeah,
Yep.
helping the heralds.
He's managing the relationship between humanity and the heralds, kind of. I think Shallan is maybe our unmade ambassador. Because she has
Oh,
always really been the one at the forefront of
yes.
the interactions with the unmade. She seems to kind of have a natural understanding of the required empathy to connect to the unmade and neutralize them in some way. I think that particularly if she continues to develop this ability to connect to the cognitive and spiritual realm, then she's in a very unique position to either be able to destroy the unmade or to be able to like remake them into either something new
Mhm.
or potentially into what they used to be before they were unmade. If she's doing the same thing as we were just talking about with the drawings that she do, if she's able to connect to the unmade, empathize with them, and then show them through this spiritual and cognitive connection, hey, this is who you could be, or this is who you truly are, then I think she could really be helpful in taking out these big powers.
Why I love this theory so much is because we do have kind of a defined role for Kaladin in
Yeah.
the future. This therapist for the heralds, a herald himself, protecting, Roshar forevermore. Shallan is the big question mark, but I still think that there is a connection between the heralds and the unmade. And so then if we
Oh
had our
gosh.
two characters that started everything off with Kaladin and Shallan, and one of them is helping the heralds and the other is helping the unmade, it would make my nerdy heart so happy. And I think that what is really exciting is that you are going to be on stage days after this episode releases talking about Stormlight Archive
That's
2
true.
and all of the theorizing, some of which we just did today. But if you want to hear more, make sure that you're at that panel. That's on Thursday. Eventually, for everybody, we will have an audio version of that panel and every panel that we do at Dragonsteel Nexus. This has been an incredible episode. I love Shallan. I love all of the conversations that we had, and I want people's theories. Hit us up. What did you like? What did you hate? Tell me how silly everything I said was, and be prepared for more episodes of all of the character and plot moments from Wind and Truth. That's what we're going to be looking at as we go forward, as well as lots of fun stuff coming from Dragonsteel Nexus.
Until next time, life before death,
Strength before weakness.
journey before destination.